Welcome to the Advancing Talent mini-series with Western Governors University here on the Innovation and Leadership Podcast. I'm Jess Larsen. Really looking forward to this episode. We've got Sandra Humbles, Chief Learning Officer of Johnson & Johnson. Sandra, thanks for doing this.
Oh, I'm really excited to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, so let's start with just a couple of things. Let's talk about how long you've been at J&J, how many employees are J&J, and what this crazy place down in Orlando is.
Yeah, no, so I feel very privileged that I joined Johnson & Johnson 33 years ago, out of the United Kingdom first for my first 10 years, in various sales and marketing positions, and then got the opportunity to move out to the United States, first based out of New Brunswick as our corporate head office. And then in the last couple of years, as I moved into being the first Chief Learning Officer for J&J, got to move to Orlando to a very special building. And it was an acquisition J&J did 15 years ago called the Human Performance Institute. And it brought a capability to our organization about putting the employee and energy management at the center and unlocking that whole potential. So I have now based myself from our J&J Learn Orlando campus and bringing that capability to the whole organization. Just a little bit on Johnson & Johnson. As you know, we have two big sectors now, our pharmaceutical sector and our medtech sector, over 130,000 employees all around the world. And my job is to really serve all of them and unlock their potential to bring their best self to work every single day.
Yeah. Well, I have so many things I'm interested in. I think I usually co-host this with my friend Spencer Stewart from Western Governors University, and he's really focused on the partners, like their big clients are like Apple and Amazon and McDonald's, and if they're trying to upskilling, like people want degrees, they work with Western Governors, right? And so he's got a certain set of questions, and my questions are a lot of times more on the, so many of the listeners of my show are founders who went from having a dozen people in a garage to now maybe thousands of employees in a very short period of time. And most of them did not become a CEO because of their HR backgrounds or their learning backgrounds. They were, probably in sales, or they were an engineer or something like this, right? And yet they start getting to these stages where they're like, man, I cannot do this out of force of character. I have to have systems to help our whole team reach another level. We can't just only hire great people. We have to then continue to build them. And so many of us have been a part of corporate trainings or learning programs where it was they weren't as outcomes focused. They were maybe did everybody stay in their seat till the PowerPoint was over? Right? And so sometimes there can be discounting of learning departments. And then when it goes well, it's it's such a force multiplier to have huge swaths of organization members being upskilled and have new capabilities. And so I think my question for you is, when you think about helping 130,000 people become better versions of themselves, help, do better for the community, do better for the shareholders, all these kind of things, what's one of your principles when it comes to adding capabilities, not just logging learning hours?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate to be really laser focused, right? So we start with, what business problems are we solving? And there's probably no surprise, in terms of what that meant by prioritization to what I was thinking about. I think when you think about Johnson & Johnson, you think about being a leader. So our leadership capability, and how do you bring that at scale to all employees? With COVID, everything changed, and our digital upskilling became, not just my priority, but the EC's priority, right? And how are we going to help people do work differently? And, all of that became, one of the biggest transformations we've ever done. You then add on top of that, what's happened in our society and being a really inclusive company and inclusion. And then the last element, has really been thinking about the burnout of our employees and how do we give them, help them with behavioral changes and actionable activities to really, look after themselves so they can be their best self. So I was extremely fortunate to, from my EC level and from our CEO, the strategic priorities were very, very clear. So we ran at those problems, and that's what we solved. And, when I start to look at, the data, and, that's the beauty of having digital ecosystems and AI helping you, you see where people are engaging and really taking the time to go deep. And those 4 areas I've mentioned is the data just completely supports it, that, we know if people don't digitally upskill, they're going to get left behind. So, people are going in and looking at generative AI, they're going in and look at intelligent automation. It's, the skills they need in the transformations that we're seeing, not just within J&J, but within our world. So one of my principles has been from the day, listen to the business and set those very, very clear priorities and run to the fire that we're trying to solve at the most senior level of J&J.
So let's pick one of those 4 to start with. Let's talk about this digital upskilling. This is something we're facing at my company, where I've got a business partner who's really technical, and on about a weekly basis, he and one of our team members have invented some new automation to AI back to automation tool for us. And then the whole rest of the company doesn't know how to use it, right? And then the only people who really get good at it are the ones who are actually using it specifically, but the rest of us might have to interact with it. And on a much, much smaller scale, we're dealing with that internally. So I want to talk about this idea of how can CLOs partner with the CEO? And so talking about this priority specifically, helping thousands of people learn AI, knowing that that's not people's backgrounds, and not just knowing about it, being able to use it. How do you think about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, for me, it started with the strategic partnership and the executive sponsorship of those initiatives. And again, we were in such a great situation here where our CIO and CHRO and also our 2 sector business leaders said this is going to be something that we need help on. And there's some things that are common across J&J that we should be solving together. And then there's some things that are unique to different sectors or different functions. And so, we had the subject matter expertise, in the business or function of data science, intelligent automation, machine learning. We were, really the strategic partners with them to help build that. But then, as creating the right learning experience and the right engagement requires having the right talent sat in the learning and development office, right? So I actually have a leader of digital upskilling who has done 2 massive transformations already. One's at another healthcare company, and then one at a financial industry, and brought that expertise into my organization to help us to do this fast. And, over the last couple of years, because it's not one size fits all. And I think that's the tricky piece, right? Because of the different complexity of a manufacturing floor to a lab to an office-based person. And so we've created different missions and have a digital base camp. And I can give you a really fun story, even for myself. Yes, I am definitely not a digital native, but I've digitally upskilled for the last, sort of 10, 15 years. And one of the things that was really bugging me was just the tsunami of emails. And if you think about that's just a basic thing, if you read every single email for 5-10 seconds, that's hours a week. And so I did the base camp on intelligent automation and took that seriously myself and did a personal intelligent automation. So PIA, right? So maybe that's a new acronym for you. And now it's game changing. I have saved hours a day by just doing the basic fundamentals. And I think my job is to keep looking for those nuggets for different populations, right? The segmentation strategy, and then starting to roll things out, test and learn, and then, literally scale them to all. And I think some of that, helps us with ways of working, productivity, so effectiveness and efficiency. And then I'm going to go right to the top end of this. In our medtech business, I mean, they're bringing robots to market, right, to help more precision surgery and less invasive surgery. And so, you need the advanced sort of, skills build there. And that's where we would then also partner externally with the right groups to bring that subject matter expertise in. So as I say, even in the space of just digital, multi-dimensional, it's like a Rubik's Cube, you're always figuring out which way to go. But I think we're in a really good place to help, different groups do different things. And, my leader is plugged into all of the top councils so that we are there to support their build, use their subject matter expertise, and get something then that is absolutely scalable to our employees.
Yeah. So, I mean, you covered so much ground there. I want to hear about surgery robots and stuff. Let's go back to AI for a minute, though. Okay, because nobody has been doing AI for 20 years at any of the companies most of us work for, right? So, when you think about AI and there's awareness of it, there's having seen it, and then there's being able to use it well enough to do my job better with AI than I was without it, right? Can we get a little granular, hey, here's something that we thought AI, these folks actually needed a capability instead of just awareness, or this is such a hot topic these days. What's an AI story?
And I think it's different across our different sectors and also in our functions. And I would say we are still at the experimentation level, but with some really good early signs. So maybe I'll go into our pharmaceutical team where they've really been looking at AI to help them in clinical trials and being much more efficient in how they're looking at that. And that has been just a rapid view, but it took bringing the right leader in with that already data science view, and then helping to, bring her team along, on that journey rapidly. And we're starting to see those results. I think the piece that we're all trying to unpack is in our different functional areas. Where can it really take work out of the system and then allow the human piece of all of this to do the more strategic work and the solutioning? And I don't think we've all got that answer yet. So I think, my job is to start, creating the right environment and the awareness training, the access to be able to experiment, and then the subject matter expertise around that, so that, if people want to fast fail, they can. We pick them up and then we send them in the right direction. So I would say, we are well on our way to figure some of this out. But it's still very new, and, every day saving hours and hours of time by asking the right questions and pulling in the right data. And I do see, particularly in the generative AI space, that is going to start, helping us both with effectiveness and efficiency across the board.
Well, let's talk about this. So let's say somebody listening today, they could be chief learning officer, a chief people officer, or CEO, and they're trying to navigate the subject matter expert issue, right? Who actually has the right expertise, and is good at teaching it, and how do we have a system that will help us realize we might not be teaching the right thing yet, and we need to go back to the beginning and start the experiment over. Let's just start with that right there. If you had advice for, CLO, CPO, or CEO as they're trying to navigate even just that decision.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely two-dimensional, if not three-dimensional. So what do I mean by that? I would say what we have done, a really good job of is identifying who those subject matter experts are, and they're usually in the business or function, right? They're not usually in the learning and development department. And so by default, my team needs to be extremely connected into the functions, into the councils, and a seat at the table. And, that's job number one. I think on my side of it, I've then got to have the really good learning performance consultants who are in partnership, with those subject matter expertise, who then have the strong instructional design principles. And that's where then the magic is happening. And that is what we are absolutely seeing. We've got to stay prioritized. So is it, generative AI, intelligent automation, the use of data and analytics to get better insights? That is being really the secret sauce, and always having that definitely lead subject matter expert, but then it's also having the counsel around it who also are having a massive input into that. And, I do think our model that we've set up at Johnson & Johnson is serving us well, of, the learning function, having the right capability and being invited in by all of those senior leaders, whether they're in the digital space and, other areas where we're focused.
So I want to talk about this. Subject matter expert has the, functional background, has the subject matter expertise, the domain background, paired with the instructional design experts. I want to talk about this. An instructional design expert who, is helping guide this subject matter expert of like, how are we going to deliver this? How are we going to measure it? When it gets down to testing competency, like, okay, here's something that could save the business thousands of hours, maybe millions of dollars if we get good at it. But again, back to the, like, it's so easy to check the box of like, I sat through the training, where, that's not that helpful to the business unless they can now perform a job differently. When it comes to that, like really granular, like measuring, this employee, we spent this money for this learning. Are they actually good enough to do that at work? What are things that you found more effective or less effective in that kind of post-training competency verification type of side of instructional design?
I'm just gonna back you up just a little bit first to maybe give you the framework that we have deployed, which I'm actually extremely proud of. And it's been with us probably more than 10 years, but we've digitized it. So let me tell you what I mean by that. So our development framework at Johnson & Johnson starts with reflections and insights, right? So putting you at the center of that dialogue and looking at, your skills, where are your towering strengths? Where do you have some weaknesses? And having that conversation and alignment very early in your journey within what I'm going to share. So basically it starts absolutely there in knowing yourself and getting that within our digital ecosystem. Where the magic starts is our development framework, and it has, basically the 3 dimensions: getting the head knowledge or education and learning, thinking about the experiences and, really the practice of how you are going to do this, so the application. And then with exposure, we're thinking much more around, the mentorship or the sponsorship that you have to really make sure that you're drilling in there. So if I said I wanted to skill up in, artificial intelligence, actually the easiest part of it is gaining all of the head knowledge, right? And, you can go out onto, our J&J Learn platform, or you can go, out onto the net and you'll find whatever you want to really upskill in AI right now. So where the magic is then the application. And so within our J&J Learn ecosystem, we have basically a whole gig platform within there where people can say, I'm upskilling in this particular area, and then they can go on to a project assignment, can be 20% at a time, sometimes 50, sometimes 100, and then start applying that knowledge with experts around them to guide them. Also within our platform, you can also, we're going to call it my dating app now. I've got the mentor matching app that allows you to then, match with a mentor who is an expert in that area. And so it's sort of the surround sound, and it is the, it is a little bit of the perfection of what we've put together here. Is once you have self-identified, these are the areas where you really want to grow, and it may be for your existing job or, even career opportunities, the surround sound of that total development is now there. So when you get to the measurement piece, which is, where your question started, it then would be, literally with the expert who is looking at you to help you to skill up and verify that learning. So in the flow of work. And then at that point, you will come back into our J&J Learn ecosystem, and your competency framework will change to what you have just done. So, you may start at the awareness level and then end up at the expert level, and that will be reflected. The magic then comes, what happens next is, because all of the AI is collecting that information on you, eventually that will start serving up projects and jobs that are relevant for where you are in your development and your growth. So I bring it back to the fundamentals. And when I started this whole journey a couple of years ago, I say, well, how is it Amazon knows me better than I know myself on what I need to shop? Why can't I have that at J&J around my learning and development? And now we do. And then on the flip side, for the education side, it's like Netflix knew me. The more I use Netflix, the better my feed is. We now have that for the actual head knowledge and the learning side. So, I think what I've done over the last couple of years is I've brought my consumer life into my work life. And now I've got, the best experience in Amazon and Netflix for J&Jers to do exactly the same. So, as I say, it now knows me. J&J is really getting to know my DNA, and that will help me to build the skills as, our business changes, the world changes. And I think it's just accelerating. COVID really made a difference. But now, if you're not taking and being part of the learning experience and upskilling, it's going to be a tricky road ahead in the world that we live right now.
I love this rabbit hole we're going down. I want to keep going. So let's think about this. For, again, whether it's the CLO or the chief people officer or the CEO who are thinking about what to have their CLO do, let's talk about what you see the future of that role. And specifically, I mean, you've just talked about a huge thing, but any other ways that you see AI changing the role of a chief learning officer over the next 5 or 10 years?
I mean, I would say in the next 2 years, everything that I'm talking about is going to be even disrupted itself, right? So, you start looking at how do you produce content? That's going to change. So, what skills do we need to be able to lean into that is probably the biggest problem that I'm facing, right? Is having the right talent to be able to move as the technology is enabling us to do things differently. And, you're going to need to have, and I'm very fortunate in JJ. I have a product team that is behind me who is always saying, look, as we start to execute here, some of that work we used to do is going away, and that's going to free up the capacity to move over here. And that's happening, I'm not going to say daily, but definitely quarterly, monthly, maybe. And, it's very fluid. I can't even say these are going to be the jobs that are in a learning and development department a year from now, because it is moving at that pace. Now, what I do know is you're always going to want to have people who are looking at the skill sets required for the organization and being close to the business and in the business, getting that feedback. But all of the, other part of behind the scenes, that's where the biggest change is probably going to happen.
Well, I guess my next question then is, if you have advice for a chief learning officer or chief people officers who's in charge of learning, as they're thinking about continuing to qualify for their own job, like, do you have ideas of routines? Do you have ideas of maybe new mindsets to embrace to still be the right person for that job 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say having that digital transformation lens every single day. And, how do you do it? And maybe I'll share a fun story here. In my previous role, I was the head of medtech education. And when I came into that role, a lot of the time where you're looking at how a surgeon learns a procedure, they're learning from an expert, right? From their professor. a lot of the, during, COVID, we had a lot of issues of trying to help some of the younger surgeons accelerate their learning because of the access. And so, I went out and spent some time, with a company looking at virtual reality and how could virtual reality help to build, procedural confidence. And literally the steps of a procedure are pretty routine, obviously, unless something goes wrong. And so we decided to start building our procedures in our virtual reality environment. And very quickly, that then moved to being able to do collaboration in virtual reality. And you could then bring in the top expert surgeons into those environments. And, you look now at how surgeon education's happening, augmented reality and virtual reality is actually now proven with the data that it is a very effective mechanism to help our surgeons to upskill and new learner surgeons to upskill very, very quickly. So how did I get there was, going externally, looking into different areas, keeping at the edge of those technology breakthroughs and then starting to experiment. And, some of it's going to work and some of it's not, but you've always got to keep that capacity to be able to look at new things. So, maybe the advice is, I don't know, is it 20-30% of our job is to have that external lens and be outside in rather than inside out. And, just taking that time in different circles. It's a lot of fun going and playing with, gamification companies and, going out and benchmarking. And, with that, you come back with the inspiration of trying some bold moves. And as I say, I started to do that, probably 15 years ago, and it just keeps going. And, I'm fortunate. I have an organization where it encourages that external lens and then partnering and tinkering and figuring out where that next, that next big change is going to be. But then there's this piece. So, maybe it's, it's getting that inspiration and, innovation and technology side of it. But then, the other piece that I think is equally important is, remember, I said I've got 130,000 employees around Johnson & Johnson. You've got to figure out scalability and globalization. And so there's the innovation side of me, but there's also then the execution side of me. And you got to be able to do both. Because if you just bring in a great thing and it only goes to a very small audience, it probably was the wrong decision. So, I definitely would urge all of, the CLOs to think, big picture, ideation, and then can you get it throughout the organization? And what is that, globalization and scalability plan that you need? Change management and comms, always important.
I am such a fan of learning, maybe at a different level than other entrepreneurs or folks. Back when Andy Grove was running Intel and he was like the Elon Musk of his time, he was such a big deal. He wrote this book, Only the Paranoid Survive, which is, still a cult classic 20-something years later. But he talks about this idea of that it's actually one of the highest leverage activities a CEO can do is get involved in their company's learning. And it signals to everyone. And like, you think about the duplication factor of like you in a meeting make a decision, and there's some decisions only the CEO can make. But there's other times where it's like, you doing one thing versus duplicating that capacity in others is, it's as you bring up scale, being able to do that at scale is so valuable for a business that wants to serve customers better, make bigger profits, things like this. So
well, Jack,
I guess my question.
I was just I got to butt in here, right? So this is the only time I'm interrupting you. As you know, J&J, literally just over a year ago, we had a CEO change and Joaquin Duarte came in as our new CEO. I will tell you, he is our biggest advocate. And, he is definitely externally focused in talking about J&J as a learning culture. He believes it is the only way that we stay ahead, that every single employee needs to be putting their learning and their development and, experimentation, and even, that fast fail type philosophy. I have got 100% support from my CEO, and I feel so blessed that, when you have that, it gives you permission to do some things differently. And as I say, he's just taking our company from strength to strength and giving every single employee the opportunity and time to take this piece seriously. So,
well, and it probably attracts people to want to work for you guys. By the way, where is the best place on the website if people are looking for a new career?
Yeah, jnj.com. Just go straight there and you'll see everything that we're talking about and their career navigation. And also, you'll see me out on LinkedIn Learning, and a lot of what we are doing in this space around, learning and development is showing up on our LinkedIn Learning feeds right now, because we're prioritizing that.
I'm happy we could go granular and go down and see what it actually looks like. I feel like so often business conversations or, articles in the magazines, they say so high level that the rest of us can't figure out how to adapt it for our organization, right? But I want to go the other direction now. Okay, so little glimpse of what this looks granularly. Now, can you give us a principle of scale, especially as you think about 130,000 plus human beings?
When I started, we had 124 learning organizations, no CLO. So they're basically, what that meant is a lot of people were developing great experiences for their group of people. And so my first job was to really think about our operating model and how are we going to get connected. There's nothing better than having 124 learning organizations all on the same train and all running faster together. And, one of the skills that, I definitely brought to the table was being a completely inclusive leader in bringing all of that might of 124 teams together. So we set up a very simple operating model where the most senior learning leader across every function and sector became part of my innovation council, if you will, or my learning council. And they gave me the insights to, what were they looking for, what was working, what was not working, and their big areas of need. And so we, I would say we're very sector function led, right, rather than learning led, which I think is a very important point. I then put into place a couple of, critical areas. I have a leader of strategy and innovation. So setting the strategy around learning and development and owning that development framework I've spoke about, and also owning the innovation agenda, which basically means our learning and development ecosystem and how that connects to the broader employee experience from onboarding and all the way through their career journeys. And once you think about having that leader of strategy and innovation, you can sort of set some standards that all 124 learning organizations need to lean into. And then I mentioned the other secret sauce is we picked the big levers that are common to all around leadership, D&I, digital upskilling, and well-being. And therefore, the offerings that were created more from the center are relevant for all of the employees. And that served as well. Now, because we are a large organization, you always then need the engine behind you to be able to scale and get work done efficiently and effectively. And I do have a J&J Learn Service Center that help with administration and, delivery and some of the instructional design. So our own instructional designers, based in our service center. So you can call it a 3-tiered model, if you will, or, 3 legs of a stool, sector and learning leaders. You've got the core capabilities that sit for the enterprise strategy innovation and those areas that are common to all. And then we've got the, our J&J Learn Service Center. And my job was keeping all that connected, having a strategic plan and a strategic roadmap that everybody was running to. And then, the real magic, and again, sometimes it's, you wake up, you say, I've got a little shower thought here, why are we not running to a bit of an audacious goal? And we only launched our ecosystem last July. So I'm talking just over 13 months. And we set off a campaign, #GoLearn. And it was one of those moments where it sort of become ingrained into Johnson & Johnson already. And, as I sit here, we've had already engagement of 55,000 employees directly into the ecosystem. Now, remember, half our population is, in our manufacturing site, so it's a different strategy there. But I'm extremely proud of the level of engagement so fast. And that was, very much a result of having that sector function learning leaders, 124 learning organizations, all connected, all knowing what we're working on. And then they had their own change networks to really accelerate embedding this into Johnson & Johnson. So, I can tell you, I sit here now with a J&J Learn front door, big red front door to our whole capability. And, it's something that we're extremely proud of and is helping every employee to literally unlock their potential. But, it's probably because my background, I have a little bit of operations in me. I have a little bit of marketing in me. I'm a good salesperson. I have a lot of resilience. And, I've had just, sponsorship from the top, from our CEO, from our CIO, from our CHRO and our business leaders that helped us to really, really move fast.
Wow, it sounds awesome. I want to dig into it though. So when you say this ecosystem, is this like an internal website they go to? Is this a application that's on people's phones? Like what does that ecosystem tangibly look like?
Yeah, so we have 3 strategic technology vendors that we have integrated them all together. And so when you come into the red front door of J&J, it actually looks like our development framework. So it encourages you to start to do your reflections and insights. And that is using amazing AI, so skills-based AI behind getting your DNA footprint, if you will. And so, yes, there is a technology front end that enabled that. Now, the magic is when you've done all of that hard work of your reflections and insights, you have then already started to build the engine for your learning, your mentorships, your gigs, because it is now pulling from that data set. We then, we are in the healthcare space, so, we have a lot of work around, quality and compliance, and that's very, very important to us. So we do have one of the largest LMS providers working with us, and then they have put a learning experience on top of that is then allowing the personalization. So as I always mention, we've got a great tech team behind us who has literally integrated what we already had at J&J with this level of innovation that has now allowed us to be able to do personalized learning and development at scale linked to your career navigation. So it's a fully integrated system that allows you to do it. So it's not actually, maybe the travel advisor, Netflix, Amazon. Ours is all the J&J Learn ecosystem, all looks the same, all connected, but it has got a couple of different technology engines behind us.
Yeah. Okay, that's helpful to get the vision for it. When you think about the ratio of how much is done self-learning, on your, self-paced learning, how much is in-person group, how much is digital group, what would you guess the mix is approximately across the organization, and what modalities am I missing?
Jess, that's probably going to be a really hard question for me, because I'm going to say it depends where you sit in the organization.
Sure.
I think, let me try and give you the simple answer. I think if you're talking, professional upskilling, so, taking it to a generic level, I'm going to say now 80% of that is now digitized, right? There are, change management, negotiation skills. A lot of that can now be done digital. But remember what I said, if you get the head knowledge, you still need the application and you need the mentorship. So that'll come from your manager. it will also come from the experiences you're going in. So I will say on some of our areas, we are very, very digitized. So, and even going further. So eventually, I hope I can even get that further. But remember, we've got our pharmaceutical business and we've got our medtech business. And medtech is very much a, hands-on experience. And so when you're thinking about upskilling your sales force, there is much more of the hands-on application piece. So I will say you're probably there. Head knowledge still, 30, 40% you could do digitally. You're probably then coming into group hands-on work, probably 40%. And then you'll be actually in the field with your manager or coach or your trainer who is then helping to pull it through at 30%. So I think it really depends, where you sit. And, maybe those are, two really good examples. But, what I'm trying to do is get a lot of the awareness and, early learning digitized so it's available for all. Then you can customize the group work and the application. And maybe I'll pull out to another example, and we were talking about it a little bit earlier around, in our leadership practice, the number one leadership capability is coaching. So with coaching, we can go to that same equation. You need the head knowledge first, you need the practice, and then you need the support to then coach you back to say you're doing a good job. And that would be a great example where, we now have an amazing digital learning and learning experience, but we then also have, certified coaches to support. And then we're also got our managers who have upskilled to then help those people to pull it through. So it's a little bit of a hybrid, but, we're definitely moving more to completely on demand when you need it. And if it's a skill that you want to work on in our digital ecosystem. I hope that answered the question because it's a little varied.
But it's also very encouraging. It's very encouraging me to hear this because I'm so in line with you. And I guess my question is, why do you think there are so many folks that think learning is just the head knowledge part? Like why do so many folks think that that forget the other 2/3 of that equation?
Yeah. Well, and I think, I think that's just how, many of us, grew up, right? You spend a lot of time, reading books, watching videos, doing e-modules, and we weren't that good at thinking through the application and then the coaching piece. And that's why I said, I think some of the brilliance of, people who were thinking about this even before I started on my own journey in this space. When we came up with that very robust development framework, we didn't throw it out with what we've invented. We actually brought it into the flow and we've made it easier. But I think it's dangerous. And, maybe, looking at the dimension, because, all of the learning professionals are thinking about upskilling. But I would tell you, when you talk upskilling, you then need to say, well, what experiences are they going to do to use those skills that you have just, been learning? Because if you don't apply it and get coaching on it, it ain't going to stick. And so I am a huge believer in keeping, that whole mix of, our development framework really real, and making sure in everything that we're doing, we're thinking through those three dimensions. And it's so easy. It's like, every single person, when they write a development plan, I'm trying to improve in X. What is the head knowledge I need? What is the project or experience I need? And who is somebody who is really good at it, who can help to coach me and give me feedback? And I think that has really been some of my guiding principles. And, I mentioned it earlier to one of your questions is, Sandra, how have you thought about your own upskilling? I will tell you, when I went and did some benchmarking, and I went to many, many places, to MBA schools, to Disney, to some of the best consultancy firms, and looked at what they were doing in the learning and development space. And I learned a little bit from all of them. And, one of them was, their framework around getting feedback, and feedback is a gift. I've lived with that my whole career. And so, that continual improvement mindset, some people think feedback is negative. I've never thought that. I think it's the best thing if you're doing something and there's something I could say, hey, have you thought about it in this way? Or, what if you looked at it this way? Suddenly something went from, something that was probably at 20% to 80% in 30 seconds. And so that culture of just, being a continual learner, but feedback is a gift, continual improvement mindset, agility, all sort of coming to that mix. And that's why I just think this foundation of the development framework has helped us to anchor and get everybody in line that please don't think about just one dimension.
Yeah. I want to talk about something you brought up there around coaching. I think, when I was the CEO of my first investment fund, we had been doing training. We'd had seminars. We'd go to seminars. We'd bring people in to do seminars. I even got facilitator trained to teach seminars at our organization. And it was good. It really was. But I didn't realize how much I was missing until I had got a CEO coach, and it just changed so much for me. And so I started doing CEO coaching for other CEOs just for free because it was like the pay it forward kind of thing. And then I got invited to take the course and get certified it. And it's I realized, man, that seminar was such a great first step in a 1,000-step journey. It is not the 1,000-step journey. It's the excitement to start the journey. And I see so much in the L&D world, this shift over time from sage on the stage, my friend Treon Muller calls him, right? The 2-day seminar, the PowerPoint, the percentage that have moved towards coaching and helping managers become coaches and all these kind of things, it does feel like a I don't know, just like a tsunami that I wondered if it was going to be a fad, but it seems to just year after year, it's almost like compound interest. More and more people are adopting that. Do you see that as well? And if you do, why do you think it's happening?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. And, it goes back maybe to, very, 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 very early in my career. And I was a people leader, in my early 20s for production supervisors. And you learn very, very quickly that if you always give people the answers, they haven't necessarily learned what you're trying to teach them. And so actually asking the smart questions and doing listening and feedback is a much better way. And I was then, and I mentioned, I'm not straight HR all of my career. So I've been in manufacturing operations, I've been in sales and marketing. And as a sales leader, I would tell you 80% of my job was coaching. And so I fundamentally believed that, a leader has to be a great coach. And, when you're out on a sales call, if you take over a sales call for a sales rep and then you walk out, you've done a couple of things. That poor sales consultant who has to go back again lost credibility with that customer. And so very quickly, you realize you were there to support and listen. And if, the customer did ask you a question, you would do it, but you would defer it straight back to, your sales consultant as fast as you could. And all of the actual feedback happened outside of the call. And, I mentioned, as we came into the whole, Johnson & Johnson dialogue, our credo has in our paragraph 2 about, highly capable leaders. And as we've dissected that, there is no better skill, and probably the number one skill as highly capable leaders is their coaching skill. And so we have invested across the board in, we've set a coaching model, with Sir John Whitmore, the GROW model. That is the standard for Johnson & Johnson. We've upskilled, our whole organization. We do have certified coaches to help in those instances where someone needs that special person who is not necessarily their manager, but we want our managers to be great coaches. We have independent coaches. And then there are certain times where an external coach absolutely makes sense, but we're definitely seeing the benefit of having that, capability within our own organization and at that scale. So I actually think it's the biggest gift. And, many of our CEOs at J&J, basically say, leaders really need to do two things. They need to think about their people and their leadership. And so this whole coaching mindset. And the other thing is, do they have the best strategic plan, the best growth plan, etc. And if you do that at 50-50, 50% on each of those things, you've got a good chance of being pretty successful. And I sort of lived with that mix of those two dimensions throughout my career. And now I'm in a position to be able to influence the agenda. And, as we look at our core skills, coaching is one of our 8. We have 8 core skills, and one of them is the coaching. Another one is around, managing teams.
Listen, this has been so fun. If people want to follow you online or connect with you, is LinkedIn the best place, or where's
Absolutely.
good?
Absolutely. LinkedIn, I am there, and I would love to hear from you, and any comments or builds on what we've talked about here. It's a challenging world, Jess. The demands of learning and development functions, during COVID was high, and we thought, we did a lot of the hard work there, but actually, I think our journey's just starting, and, you really did bring out, some of the right, conversation here on, the digital transformation and what generative AI, intelligent automation is going to do. I would say, helping all of the learning and development partners, to be agile and move into where work is going is absolutely critical. So I'd love to hear other people's points of view and any other advice they would have for me as I navigate this over the next couple of years.
That's so great. Well, listen, maybe to end off, what's one of the best pieces of advice you ever received?
I would say the best piece of advice is when you ever start with a problem, go and look outside first and do your diligence before you come up with which way you're going to go. Go and do the benchmarking.
Solid advice. I love it. Well, thanks again for making time for this.
Well, thank you so much, Jess. I really enjoyed the conversation, and look forward to continuing this at some time. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Bye, everyone.